Hi, everybody. I'm Juan Cicada, principal scientist here at Data.World, and it is a true honor. I am so excited to have this conversation with my friend and colleague, Ora Lasila. Ora, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Juan?
Well,
Uh,
it is. Um, I have been waiting for this moment for so long because we have been working together for so long and known each other for a long time. And the title of this session is Designing and Building Enterprise Knowledge Graphs because that's the title of the book that we wrote together. Um, but look, I would love for you to tell everybody a little bit about your history because you have a lot of history. I want us to get into why we ended up writing this book.
I see. I'm the old guy here. Well, of course, you and I have known each other for quite some time. But before we knew each other, so I have a long history with ontology, semantics, graphs, all that. In the late 1990s, I co-authored the original RDF specification, and then ended up doing a lot of writing about the semantic web, and was kind of very closely involved in kind of creating that vision. And of course, the semantic web, in many ways, is the underpinnings for the modern knowledge graph phenomenon. So that's basically my history. Been in several companies. Nowadays, I'm member of the Neptune graph database team at Amazon Web Services.
Yeah. So I think some of the things that we've kind of been passionate about our whole lives is this notion of semantics, it's meaning. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about for so long is how just in the enterprise data is so messed up, and frankly we kind of need some sort of a reboot. And I think this is why this whole track is called the knowledge first track. And I think from your perspective is what are the things that you have seen over so many decades that, hey, like we're doing this kind of wrong. We should be thinking about it, have a paradigm shift and start thinking about semantics and knowledge and meaning that leads us to these ontologies and all that stuff. So I'd love for if you can share some of your examples here.
Sure. I think that the bottom line is that nobody knows what semantics means, which is kind of and people throw that term around a lot, but the fact remains that people are very, very focused on syntax. What does the data look like? And that kind of distracts them from the real issues. In a way, sort of the real issues are higher up the stack. And Oftentimes I see people just spending too much time on figuring out things about syntax, and they kind of completely forget about semantics. So I can give you a couple of examples. So things I hear a lot and have heard a lot throughout my career is people say my data model is JSON. And to which I can only reply, JSON is not a data model, and JSON is a simple meta model for tree-like structures and no semantics. And then they say my data is just JSON, and to which I reply, it's never just JSON because you're forgetting semantics, and so you're always sort of, in a way, sort of looking at the data through your own interpretation, which means that you impose your own semantics on the data. And that's those kinds of things are around a lot. When you think about data, the way we represent it today and how we store it, so much of today's data management actually happens in Excel spreadsheets. Hate to say that, but that's just what it is. And so let me give you sort of this kind of little thought experiment. Let's say I have some data and I put it in an Excel spreadsheet. And because I'm trying to do my job diligently, I give the columns some kind of descriptive names. Now I have data. I'm thinking, okay, this is great. I can share this. I put it on a USB stick. I dig a hole in the ground and I put the USB stick there. And I leave it there for 100 years. So now, after 100 years, somebody digs it up. And let's just assume that one can still read USB sticks at that point, and one can open Excel spreadsheets. What do we know now? Well, first of all, we know that anybody who had anything to do with that data when it was created is no longer around. So all you have is that data. What are the chances that you'll be able to make some meaningful use of that data? I'd say slim to none. You don't really know what those columns mean. They may have some names, but who knows? We always, as humans, we tend to interpret things, and your interpretation of some column name may not be the same as my interpretation was when I created that. So this is basically an example of data, but no semantics.
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah,
that interpretation is key. And I think this is where we need to realize, where is that interpretation happening? And that interpretation today, which is what do I mean about this? That could be happening in your dashboard, in your some BI tool. That can be happening inside of the code, the application that's reading that data. It's happening in the code that's actually generating that data. It is literally in somebody's head, who they're the person who knows what this data means. And then they're the ones who writes a description in an email. Here's what you should go. This is what it means. So
right.
this is the problem. For me, it is, we live in this world of data first. Just give me more data. All I want is more data. Data, data, data. Just, we have having all these lakes have empowered us to just make storage of data cheaper. And then, but why? Why do we need all this data? In reality, we need to be able to go make an interpretation of this. What is this? What is the problem I'm trying to go solve? And what is the data that I need for that? I don't need so much more data on this. I think we have really drowned ourselves to the point that I love Einstein's definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think that's the problem that we have right now, which is we're literally driving ourselves insane. The problems that we have today, every customer prospect I talk to, they're the same problems that people had 20 years ago. And actually, if you start the book, you will see that the first story that we show there is, oh, there's a financial organization who's trying to go get this data. And you're like, it resonates with probably a problem that you've heard yesterday. And like, this actually comes from a paper from 1992. And I'm like, this is amazing. The problems that people had 20, 30 years ago are the same problems that we have today. And if that doesn't concern you, I mean, then we've literally been wasting our time. So something needs to change. And for me, that position is, we need to start thinking about knowledge, start thinking about meaning, semantics. And that's a paradigm shift. Hence the whole track here. So,
Right.
that's our position here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so one of the things that we put in the book, and we keep emphasizing, is that first of all, we need to give people access to data so that they can start creating this knowledge. And access to data doesn't mean just the physical bits. If you just give them the physical bits, and that's the easy part, but without the kind of explaining what the data means, you have done really no service to these people. So accessible data really means physical bits plus semantics. And of course, semantics, we don't have to take a sort of a tremendously academic view of what semantics is, or philosophical view. I would say that semantics in this case is just, how do information systems interpret that data? How do they make use of that data in a meaningful manner? So so there you basically have it. I mean, a modern data practice doesn't really recognize this yet, and in a way, sort of what we see happening is just a terrible mess out there.
Yeah.
I think people keep putting band-aids on things, but they're not really solving the actual problem.
And I also think that our focus is on the infrastructure, the pipelines, moving the data, moving these bits, while at the end of the day, the end users, the business users, right? The people who are actually making decisions, that are the critical decisions that are going to increase value to the organization, honestly, they don't care about how the data is moving. I mean, they just want to make sure that the decision is going to make that I'm going to make is the right one. Yes, I need to have trusted data, I need to have quality data and all that stuff. Those are the means to the end. And I also think I always argue that data management in general is a social technical phenomenon. And we have been thinking about this from a technical point of view. We have defined success from a technical point of view, and we have forgotten the whole social aspect and realize what does success look like is the end user is actually is able to answer their question. Not that
Right.
you have a very scalable system that's a means to an end. Which leads
Right.
me to another point that we want to make is that a knowledge first world is a social world, right? It's where you really understand who are the people, what is the context, how are these things connected. I think that's a crucial aspect we need to start thinking about. That, frankly, I don't think we are right now.
In many ways, I think we should start thinking about data and knowledge the way we've been thinking about software and software applications for a long time. I mean, you and I are computer scientists, and we work with a lot of people who are computer scientists, and we don't know much about the social aspects of things necessarily, but there over the last couple of decades, there's been a tremendous sort of increase in the focus on usability of software, usability of information systems, and user experience and things like that. Does anybody think about the usability and user experience of data and knowledge? I mean, I seldom see that, and I think that we need to start thinking about data and knowledge as products, not just some kind of a side thing there. You're building an application, and oh yeah, there's some data.
Yeah.
Applications, tools, those kinds of things, they come and go. They don't matter. They're not important.
Mm-hmm.
The data and knowledge you have, that's important. And of course, the data, like you said, it's a means to an end, and the end is having questions answered and having been able to make decisions.
Yeah. So I love having this chat, but I want to make sure everybody has some very concrete takeaways. So let's go to the slides because there's 3 specific takeaways you want people to go have. So the first one, we already started to talk about it. Semantics, not syntax. Or how about you kick us off with this one?
Well, I mean, I I kind of alluded to this already, but one of the things that is hard for many people to grasp is that syntax is a solved problem. You don't have to think about syntax anymore. You can just completely forget it. You have data that conforms to some model or some meta model, or rather, let's say RDF, just for the sake of picking one. Once you decide that your data is RDF, now all of a sudden syntax you can completely forget about it. It's a solved problem, and it only distracts you from solving the real problems if you start focusing on syntax. So if you take one thing, from what I say in this, forget syntax. It doesn't matter. Okay, I went through the USB stick story already. So I think that's another illustration of sort of what happens with the lack of semantics.
Yeah. So I want to make so that's our first point. So let's dive into the second one, where I think there's a lot more meat to be discussed here. As we were talking about the modern data practice, we think it is a big mess, right? We do see these monoliths approaches that have just been constructed. One day, probably things were fine. In day 1, day 0, somebody defined a really nice data model, right? I always talk about the e-commerce example, which is what we go through a lot in the book, and people say. There's an order table, there's a customer table, there's an order line table, right? This is the typical model that you see in any textbook and databases. But when you actually go to the application database, you look at, well, there's no order table, right? There's order data probably spread around 15, 20 tables. Why? Well, it was the need for the application, right? It's horizontally partitioned, it's vertically partitioned, and so forth. And then somebody comes along and they're like, well, we need to make this change, but hey, if it works, don't touch it, don't break it. So what do? You create another table or another database, you copy the data over there, you keep doing it, and then this keeps growing and growing. People don't do the documentation. There's no information about what this actually means, right?
Right.
So that's this big mess that we're in. This is the application centric world that we live in. And this is the switch. We need to realize that that data there actually has meaning, but that meaning is probably again inside of the applications that run it. It's inside of people's heads. It's in macros in Excel. It is in some queries that people are running. It is embedded in some of the dashboards. That's what we need to be able to kind of extract and start figuring out. And frankly, we need to start cataloging. So I want people to realize that when we talk about a data catalog, it's actually more than a cataloging data. We need to be cataloging the actual knowledge. And that may start as simple as here's some business glossary terms. That's a first starting point. But eventually when you start thinking is, oh, what is this glossary? What is this actually? Is this a metric, for example? Okay, this is a metric for net sales. What does net sales actually mean? Okay, here's an English description of it, but what does it actually mean in the data? How is that being calculated? Does that concept of revenue or net sales show up today, in which dashboards, and how is that being calculated over there? At the end of the day, you want to be able to have almost the mathematical formulas for that calculated to the point that we want to be able to realize, wow, we are calculating this so many different ways and we're actually calling it the same. No wonder we have so much disagreements.
Yeah.
And maybe at that point you realize, okay, this is the right one, and these other ones we're going to deprecate them, or we're going to change the names to that. So this is when we say this is what we mean by having this idea of a knowledge first world where semantics matter.
Right, right. I mean, we say data matters, but of course, like on the slide, when we say data matters, we actually mean semantics matters, because we don't necessarily want more and more data. We want higher quality knowledge. And higher quality in this case means that you actually understand how it was put together, how it works, how to interpret it, what it means, all that.
And we have here some words. Let's go through them: ontologies, schemas, mappings, transforms, identity. And I think these are the things that we need to start thinking about more today, which frankly we're not doing. We're starting to go see this now, right? I think tools like DBT are bringing in transformations as a first-class citizen, and I think that's a first fantastic step. But we need to go more. So if you think about it, you'll probably have your business glossary terms as kind of your first step towards a knowledge first world. But hey, those business glossary terms actually have some relationships between them. They can be a hierarchical relationship, right? You start creating almost a taxonomy of things. You start grouping them by different domains, by different schemes. Then they'll actually have relationships across them. Like there's a concept of an order. There's a concept of a customer. How is that related? Well, a customer can place an order. There's an address. There's multiple addresses, right? There's a billing address, there's a mailing address, there's a shipping address, and an order can have different relationships to those types of addresses. This, frankly, is how the business users think about the world. And this is what you could literally go in front of a whiteboard and you can go draw this out. And that is really kind of the next step of having you can interpret it from a physical point of view as your schema, but this is also the ontology. This is a representation of the knowledge that is in people's heads. And that's the type of stuff I think we're going to start seeing graduating from, hey, you got a business glossary, you're probably going to have some taxonomies, then you're starting adding relationships between all the concepts, and you're starting to get this richer in knowledge about what happens. And
ontology,
also,
if I may, ontologies are actually really important. And the reason why I'm saying this is that the ontology isn't only kind of the complex logical model that your system uses, to help in interpretation of the data, but an ontology is also sort of a structured, formal way for you to document how you understand the data. What is your interpretation? And people often forget this, but that's a very important aspect of building ontology.
And in the enterprise, what we wanted to go do is we are going to start drawing and figuring out what this stuff actually means. And you're going to literally put it on the whiteboard and draw these bubbles and lines. But we can't just leave it there. We can't leave it as a picture. We can't leave it there just as a bunch of words in your glossary, in your catalog. We need to ground that into the reality, which is the data that comes from all our application systems. And that grounding is how we're actually giving the semantics to what that word order means or what that word customer means. And that grounding is in the forms of mappings or transforms. I mean, these are all rules. I always tell people, hey, a mapping, a transform, a rule, a query, a view, they're all the same thing from a mathematical perspective. It's a function, right? You have the head of the rule has a body. They're all the same thing. We're going to go. So what we want to be able to, what we'll start doing is to start understanding when I say the word order, customer, net sales, order status, shipping date, telephone number, if that's what it means at the knowledge level, how is this connected to the data, to the actual place where these systems are generating this data? Those are those mappings. And I think that's the next thing that we're going to start seeing. And another aspect is identity. And I think this is another thing that we frankly don't really think about. How am I going to uniquely identify what is a customer, what is an order? Because at the end of the day, I want to start making these connections, these relationships between them. And the moment we start thinking about identity, we are now bringing these real world concepts. We're turning them as first class citizens, right? It's not just the dashboard, but it's actually, I can now start asking any types of questions around this because I know what this stuff actually means. It has an identity. And at the end of the day, these are just the concepts I'm going to be thinking about. And I really want us to realize that we don't need to focus so much on tools because the tools will come and go. But these really important concepts that are within the organization, they will always be there. And I remember one of our customers, the CIO, told me once, look, we've been around for 400 years. I want to make sure that our business is around for the next 400 years. And it's not the technology, right? This is about having that knowledge to be able to understand that. And going back to your example of the USB stick, or like that's what we need to think about. We need to think about how can we make sure that we're going to live in this resilient world, and our data and knowledge together is going to be there.
And I didn't pull the 100 years in that example from just out of thin air. I mean, I think in the EU, there are banking regulations that require some data to actually be kept around for 100 years. So this is not some joke. This is real.
This is real. And finally, it's people and processes, right? This is what we need to start realizing, is that we need to be able to understand how we're going to organize our organization, our enterprise. What are the people who has this knowledge? What are the new types of roles that we're seeing to be able to go figure out and manage what is this knowledge and be that bridge between the consumers and the producers? And what are the processes to do that?
The technology involved here is not that difficult. I think people and processes are far more difficult. I would say that this is less of a technology problem and more of a social and organizational and process problem.
And I think that's the paradigm shift, right? Our insanity, we're insane right now because we've just focused only on technology and expecting that we just need more technology and more data. That is what's driving us insane. What we need, the paradigm shift here is we need to focus on the social aspects, the people in the process, and also on the knowledge, which leads us to our final point that we want to make, which is we need to enter this knowledge first world. And how do we do this? Well, that's why we actually wrote a book about it, right?
And the book talks about graphs, but this isn't really necessarily even so much about graphs. I mean, it's really about semantics, and this is the kind of thing we want to emphasize. And you're going to have all kinds of data. Not all of it is in graph form.
Exactly. Even the title of the book is about enterprise knowledge graphs. If you go through the book, you'll realize that, well, do I really need to put all this stuff in a graph? I mean, maybe not. You can do this in a relational world and stuff. At the end of the day, we live in a connected world. Everything is not going to fit always in tables, and you want to be able to have a distributed way of connecting things. I mean, all of this technology that we've talked about, right? RDF is the model for representing data on the web. The web itself is a big graph. It's all about having identifiers and their links. So it is this inspiration of having built this completely amazing, decentralized, and distributed information network that we have. And frankly, that's what we want to go do within our enterprises. So within the book, what we have is talking a lot about, first of all, these mappings. So once you start, if you have given a model, an ontology, how do I connect this to the actual data where it's coming from? And there's a lot of mapping patterns that we describe within the book to go do that. So this is the way how we physically start connecting the knowledge to the data. We also go a lot through the notion of the process. We have an agile methodology on how to create the ontology and create this knowledge graph little by little. Because I think that's one of the problems that we see all the time is that people want to boil the ocean. And you do not want to go spend all your time go figure out the knowledge of everybody and then start connecting together. You need to do that little by little. And then we talk a lot about the people. What are the new types of roles that we have, such as the data product managers, and also we're calling the knowledge scientists. This is that bridge between the consumers and the producers, right? As a knowledge scientist who's on a data product team, you're the one who wants to be able to understand what the business people are talking about, how those are related, and then be able to go translate that to the technical folks and realize, oh, this is the data, what it is, and then being able to kind of bridge this gap. And actually, I call it a science because you're going to find that so many different meanings out there. You have to hypothesize which could be the right one and why, and go have experiments and stuff like that. Or what else would you like to add here?
I mean, I think that the term knowledge scientist and the idea of it is really important. And notice we didn't say data scientist, because everybody wants to be a data scientist, but actually you don't want to be a data scientist. You really want to be a knowledge scientist, because that's that's really sort of getting closer to doing something meaningful with the data that you have transformed into knowledge. So I think that's important.
So our call to action is please get the book. We got a 25% discount code right there with that link, and discount code is Data World. And hopefully this will inspire you to start getting onto that journey from a data first world to a knowledge first world. And with that, thank you very much.
Great.